Welcome into Fantasy Fix, our fantasy football podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Holt. I'm joined by Darren Hartwell. Darren, happy Tuesday to you.
Great Tuesday today.
You know why it's a great Tuesday at Nesson specifically is because they have chair massages. So they bring the masseuse here to Nesson. You are in a room. There's another masseuse. So the only thing I don't like about it is that you are paired up with a random coworker, right?
Yeah.
So it depends on who you get.
But I feel really good. I feel nice
great.
and limber, you know. That's what they get. You know, we're big time stars over here, so they have to bring in the massage people for us, make sure we're feeling good. So.
I just got mine, so I'm feeling nice and relaxed. I think I might still have a mark here on my face from when I was in the chair, but hey, it's the price we pay for being relaxed at work. I'm also very relaxed because I had a great week 3 in fantasy football. And as you know, I was doing horrible in our league. I was 0-2, and we're doing this little fantasy football podcast, and it was embarrassing telling people that I had lost my first 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, it's early.
2 weeks.
Now you're turning things around.
I am, and I have a couple of people to thank for that. Stephon Diggs, Vikings wide receiver, 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. Thank you, Stephon. Devontae Freeman, Atlanta Falcons running back, 138 yards and a touchdown. Thank you, sir. And last but not least, AJ Green. So I had all these guys on my roster. I was waiting for them to do something good, and this is a week that he stepped up specifically. 111 yards and a touchdown. He recorded his 500th reception and 50th touchdown of his career. So good for him.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are studs. So
yeah. So the person I was playing just didn't stand a chance. How did you do in your league?
I had similar success, actually. I think the massages clearly helped us after the fact somehow.
It's our reward.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had a little bit under the radar guys helping me out. Brandon Cooks obviously had his huge day. A couple touchdowns there, lots of yards, and then Chris Thompson continuing his hot start. Picked him up off the waiver wire this week, and that paid huge dividends for me. Both of them had almost 30 points in my Yahoo league, so they kind of helped me coast to victory there. So
it's just a lot more satisfying when it's a guy that you picked up off the waiver wire.
That's right.
It's so satisfying. Okay, let's talk about takeaways from this season in general so far. I think it's been a very unpredictable NFL season up until this point. I'm talking about the teams, their records, of course. Maybe it started off with the Patriots losing their first game, and then we kind of knew it was going to be wacky for the rest of the season. I mean, the Giants are 0-3. What's up with that? I'm from New Jersey, so a lot of my friends, they're rooting for the Giants, so sorry, guys. A lot of them rooting for the Jets, though, and they got a win last week. So, like I said, very unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, I know it's been tough if you're in like a survivor league. It's kind of been, it's really tough. I picked the Texans in week 1. Jaguars just destroyed them. So I got knocked out right away. Jaguars have been another surprising team. They just toasted the Ravens over in London. So yeah, I agree. It's definitely been unpredictable. That's sometimes that's how the season kind of starts. It's up and down, and teams are trying to figure out their identities and trying to figure out where to go. Things usually even out over the course of the season, but right now it's been a roller coaster.
Well, all eyes were on the NFL in week 3, and now this had a lot to do with what was happening on the field before the game with the national anthem, of course, but on the field we had some great games. Quarterback play, though, very unpredictable.
Yeah. So this was pretty wild. So you have the top 6 quarterbacks, scoring quarterbacks in week 3. Tom Brady, number 1. Russell Wilson, number 2. You know, after that's a bounce back. The next 4 guys: Case Keenum, Jacoby Brissett, Blake Bortles, and Brian Hoyer.
Yep, didn't see any of those ones coming.
Just like you drew it up. So yeah, that's all those guys are owned in 12% or fewer of Yahoo leagues. So that, again, that's just, especially at the quarterback position, it's so volatile. Guys can go off in any moment. And a lot of times it's situational. You have guys playing from behind, throwing a bunch of passes. Brian Hoyer they were kind of in a shootout with the Rams, so that's kind of the way it goes sometimes.
And I know a lot of Patriots fans, they of course know a lot about Jacoby Brissett. He was the 3rd string quarterback on the team until he got traded, and he's taking over for Andrew Luck until he gets healthy enough. Is he a viable person to bring onto your roster at this point, or?
Honestly, I think he's not the worst streaming option, just because of his ability to run too. I think that was a big reason why he had so many fantasy points. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. So I think at the very least he's going to have a pretty high floor, and especially the Colts aren't the best team. They're not going to be They were playing the Browns last week, so it's a pretty easy matchup. But they're going to be playing from behind a lot of times, especially if he's behind center. So I think he can get some opportunities. It looks like they're really giving him the keys to the offense without Luck. So he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. Kind of if you're in a deeper league, kind of a deeper waiver wire dive there.
Okay, not only are a lot of the star quarterbacks unpredictable at this point, but just star players in general.
Yes.
We talked about it the past couple of weeks. We had guys like Odell Beckham Jr., T.Y. Hilton, Doug Baldwin. They weren't doing anything for us.
Yeah.
So what's your take on those bigger names in Week 3?
Yeah, Week 3 on that front, it was kind of an advertisement to stick with your guys a little bit.
Yeah.
It's easy to give up on them. I actually benched Baldwin in one of my leagues, and I paid the price. Sometimes it's a matter of time with these guys. They have to figure it out. The offenses have to figure it out. The Seahawks offensive line was struggling, and they were struggling in the first half against the Titans, but they finally were able to figure it out. Baldwin was a big recipient. Another big guy in that category is Jordan Howard. There was a lot of concern about Howard, especially with how Tariq Cohen kind of burst onto the scene in the first game, and then Howard kind of had a shoulder injury. It was reported that he's playing through a sprained AC joint, so I actually ended up trading Jordan Howard in one of my leagues early on, kind of a sell high situation. I got Michael Thomas, so it's been working out okay. He scored a touchdown, but again, Howard was, I think, the second highest scoring running back in Week 3 behind Todd Gurley. So he's one of those guys that he's gonna produce. I think he's gonna produce a lot when he stays in the field if he's healthy. The Bears just are really committed to that run game, and I think both Cohen and Howard can be consistent guys. So again, the wider point here is these guys are studs for a reason. The reason why you take a high draft pick for them. Obviously, you don't want to ride a guy if he's just not performing all year. But this early in the season, there's something to be said for sticking with the big names.
Patience is a virtue is what you're telling us, but
Exactly.
it's hard to do in fantasy football, especially if there's money
hard.
on the line and you're playing in front of your friends and you want to beat them.
Hard.
It's easier said than done. Now, what about some of the big names that still haven't performed well even after Week 3? Maybe a guy like LeSean McCoy, who has yet to score a touchdown in 2017.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's another guy in that same boat. It's tempting to maybe put him on the bench or bump him down a little bit. Same thing, I guess, with Le'Veon Bell, although he still is getting a lot of volume and his floor is a lot higher. But I think with McCoy, you have to stick with him too. I just think the volume is huge. He's going to get a lot of touches on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, and he should continue to get those touches. He'll find the end zone eventually. The Bills' offense hasn't been too great early in the season, and I think a lot of teams are gearing up to stop McCoy. But then, that's what NFL teams do. They go back and they make adjustments and they find ways to adapt, and I think that's what you're going to see with McCoy. I think as long as, obviously, injuries are a concern with him, but if he stays healthy, the points will come. This
is a good reminder that it's only Week 4. I know I was panicking after my first 2 losses of the year, so we're feeling a little better at this point. Okay, good.
Nice and relaxed. Not a massages.
The massages definitely help.
Not overreacting.
We recommend those if you're struggling right now in your fantasy football league. Now let's talk about injuries and their implications. Darren Sproles, you hate to see this happen, the Eagles running back. Torn ACL and a broken arm.
Tough.
In the same play. First off, ouch.
Yeah.
Second off, what does this do to the Eagles?
Yeah, that's a pretty tough blow and kind of a tough way to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, Sproles is plays a big role in that offense. I think this is big for Wendell Smallwood. He's kind of the next guy up after Sproles. I think he can do a lot of similar things. He got a lot of touches in. I think he had 10 plus touches when Sproles went down. So he's going to be a guy that can fill in both in the running game and the passing game. So I think he's owned in about 8% of leagues right now. I think he's worth a pickup.
Okay, Melvin Gordon, absolute stud, but he missed part of Sunday's game with a knee injury. He said he would be good to go, but knee injuries, we all know they're nothing to be played with. I mean, what are you thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he's going to be okay. At least that's what he said. I think any MRIs or anything came back negative. It looks like he's going to be in line to play, but I think you just have to monitor it. And then another name to monitor there is Brandon Oliver. That's his backup. Oliver is a guy, one of those kind of waiver wire guys who always bounces around. If someone gets hurt, he kind of pops in there. He saw a lot of opportunities, in the past with Chargers running backs getting hurt. He's another guy who can get you receptions and can be a big factor in the run games. He gets a lot of rushes. So just keep an eye on him. If you're a Melvin Gordon owner, maybe pick up Oliver off the waiver wire if you have an open roster spot, kind of a handcuff option there.
Okay, what about Kelvin Benjamin? Knee injury, not expected to be too serious again, but what happens there with the Panthers?
Yeah, bad news for the Panthers. they have some problems, especially on that offense. Obviously, Greg Olsen was the guy we talked about last week going out with an injury. But, I would say I guess the next guy up is Devin Funchess. He's a guy we'll talk about a little bit later, but he had 10 targets on Sunday in Benjamin's stead. But, he's kind of going to be the guy who gets a lot of those targets. That's also good for Christian McCaffrey's stock, I think. McCaffrey plays a big role in the passing game too, and he's seen a lot of targets already, so I think that'll only increase. Benjamin may or may not play. He still could play against the Patriots next Sunday, but if he doesn't, then look at McCaffrey and Funchess.
Okay, let's talk about the waiver wire. We want to know who is the real deal at this point and who's just going to lead us to disappointment. I know last year I had Spencer Ware. I picked him up, and every time I won a matchup because of him, I was always so proud. But waiver wire is a special thing. Like I said, it just it makes you feel proud when your guy off the waiver wire does well. So who is the real deal? Who can we get at this point?
Yeah, I like to call them waiver wire all-stars. I think this guy, I'm a little biased, but I think it's Chris Thompson. I think this is a guy who really is gonna make an impact. It's a pretty crazy stat. He's made a first down on 56% of his touches, his entire touches this season. So he's a guy that's really explosive. He's averaging almost 10 yards per play. It's funny, Jay Gruden in a press conference was asked, is Thompson going to get more touches? And he's like, nope, I'm going to limit him. He's not getting any more touches. But this is a guy who makes something happen every time the ball is in his hands. So I think he's still going to, even if his volume is low, he's making plays. He has 4 touchdowns in his first 3 games. I think he can play a significant role in this Redskins offense, especially in the passing game. He gets more work in the passing game than he does in the running game a lot of times. So I think of that, especially if you're in a PPR league, I think he's worth hanging on to. Okay,
and what about some guys that are leading us to disappointment?
Yeah,
like a lot of my ex-boyfriends.
Yeah, well, I like Devin Funchess there, or I guess I don't like Devin Funchess there. We talked about him earlier, but I just think that he hasn't really, he's one of those guys who the opportunity has been there for him a few times, and with Benjamin's injury, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, we talked about maybe Funchess is the guy that steps up, and he hasn't really done that yet. He had 10 targets, but I think he only caught 4 balls, and two of those targets were intercepted last week. So I think I'm gonna need to see something from him before I roll him out there. I think the Panthers have enough problems on offense right now with Cam Newton.
Oh yeah, not looking good.
Yeah, it's not looking great. So I'm kind of, the red flag is up for me on Funchess.
Very interesting. Well, they're taking on the Patriots this week, so I know a lot of people don't mind that their offense is not what it used to be. Any guys that we haven't mentioned yet that you like on the waiver wire for Week 4?
Yeah, one guy who may or may not be owned in your league. He's about 50% right now. Duke Johnson Jr. rather. He's on the Browns. He leads the Browns in receptions and receiving yards. So he's essentially a wide receiver playing running back, and that's really valuable, especially at the running back position. It's tough to find guys who have that kind of consistent volume. Again, in PPR leagues, he's probably going to be owned in PPR leagues, for being honest. But even in non-PPR leagues, he's another kind of similar to Chris Johnson in that he's makes some explosive plays in the passing game. He made a really good one-handed catch the other day. So I think you can. I think he's worth paying. I mean, if he's not already added, I would put him on your roster.
And last but not least, what about quarterbacks? I know we already mentioned that there's a lot of guys surprising us so far, the top quarterbacks of last week. But for Week 4, who would you consider picking up of those names maybe that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think. Let's see here. Yeah, I got. Sorry, I had Week 5 up. We were looking at.
We're already thinking ahead. This is why Darren's doing well in our fantasy football league.
We were looking too far ahead.
He's looking to week 5.
I do like Jay Cutler. I think he's a guy. He's had mixed results, but he's playing the Saints. And the Saints defense is pretty bad. They've given up huge points to quarterbacks. Obviously Cam Newton notwithstanding, they kind of turned the tide a little bit, but I don't think that's a long-term trend. I think they're going to that defense is going to continue to struggle. So I like if you're kind of searching on the waiver wire, I think Cutler's not a bad ad.
Moving on to our favorite Patriots, we all love to talk about them in New England here. Let's do a little fantasy football check-in. Week 3, Brandon Cooks certainly paid off for anyone that was playing him. He didn't have a lot of touches, but he did. Let me read my notes here. I thought I had the stats here.
Was it 5 catches?
He had a big game for them.
5 catches, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, this is that's kind of the thing with Cooks. He's kind of the big play guy. That's what he was in New Orleans, and that's what he's going to be in New England. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to catch 7, 8, 10 balls a game, but he's going to make those big plays. And I think you saw last Sunday. That's kind of the best you're going to get right there. And I think that he's kind of I think you can count on him on a consistent basis, even if the volume is still kind of low. I think he's good for big plays. They have so many other options, even with Edelman out, that I think those big plays are going to be there for him. Next week you got the Panthers. I think the Panthers have a solid defense, but I think that's not a matchup that scares me. And for me, I'm a guy who owns Cooks, and after last week, I'm rolling him right back out there.
Okay, and you also own Mike Gillislee, I believe. Mm-hmm. Okay, week 3, no touchdowns, just 31 yards on 12 carries. Yeah. What are you thinking? Yeah,
this is kind of the downside of Gillislee. He's very touchdown dependent. And when he doesn't get touchdowns, the fantasy numbers are not good. This was kind of a stinker for him. I don't really trust him too much in my leagues unless it's a really good matchup and the Patriots are gonna kind of run up the score. I don't think that's necessarily the case with the Panthers, so I'd probably avoid him.
And the man, the myth, the legend, Tom Brady. This is a guy who in week 1, he had, I think, 10 fantasy points in Yahoo leagues. People were telling us again that he's too old. He's washed up. Mm-hmm. He's not going to do anything. Then the second week, he had, 30 or something like that? And
he had a lot of points.
And he had 35 in week 3, I believe.
Yeah, he just keeps upping the ante.
Yes, he certainly does. He threw for 378 yards and 5 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think the sky's the limit for him this year?
First of all, Tom Brady, a guy who definitely knows about massages. He's gotten a few at the TB12 performance facility over there.
They're working.
I think he's a pretty safe bet. I don't think I don't think we can expect 5 touchdown passes. That's a pretty high bar. But after the last 2 weeks, I'm not going to be the one to tell you that Tom Brady is not going to perform well or that he's too old. I think the Patriots are kind of the bottom line is they have to throw the ball a lot. I mean, Gillislee, look at his yards per carry last game. Like we said, 31 yards on 12 carries. I think they're going to be passing the ball a lot. Brady's going to get a lot of volume, and regardless of how the game plays out, the stats are going to be there.
And let's look ahead to Thursday night football, Bears versus Packers. Last week, Thursday night, we had Rams 49ers. We didn't predict too much excitement there. I think there was maybe 2 players that we liked, right? Well, the Rams won 41-39. It was like when Oprah gives out prizes to everyone. It was like, fantasy points for you, fantasy points for you. Everyone got fantasy points. So let's talk about this Thursday night. Who do you think is going to do well?
Yeah, it was interesting because that's usually not the trend with Thursday night games. They're usually pretty low scoring, so I'm a little bit thrown off the scent a little bit. But I would say for Bears Packers, I mentioned Howard and Cohen earlier. I actually think you still can play both of them. I think it's a tough matchup for them playing at Lambeau Field, but Howard is kind of the bell cow. He's going to get you the yards in the running game. He's a pretty safe bet for a touchdown. I would say the Bengals did a lot on offense in the first half of that game last week before Green Bay kind of turned it around. So I think you can start him, and then I think you can start Cohen. I just if you look at last week he actually got 10 plus fantasy points, depending on what league you're in. He's going to catch balls out of the backfield, and they're going to feed him. He's the guy you look to if if the Bears get down, they're going to start feeding him, and he's going to be kind of the check down guy, getting a lot of targets. So I like both of those guys.
Who do you dislike?
Yeah, former Patriot here, Martellus Bennett. I won't put this on Twitter. You might at me. He does not like the fantasy people on Twitter.
I don't blame them though. When anyone in the NFL attacks the fans for blaming them for fantasy football points, I don't blame them whatsoever.
That's why we keep it right here.
Yes.
We don't take it to Twitter. But I'm not big on Bennett this week. The Bears have actually been pretty solid against tight ends. They've kind of locked down the primary tight end on the other team this season. So the Packers, look, they have a lot of weapons, and Bennett's kind of one of those guys who he has been targeted in the red zone, but he's pretty touchdown dependent. You have Jordy Nelson, you have Devontae Adams. Obviously, they missed Randall Cobb last week, but he's a guy who could come back. Cobb comes back, that's a lot of mouths to feed. So I think Bennett is kind of a risky play.
I have Bennett sitting on the bench. I've been very discouraged up until this point. Yeah. So I don't know. He may be one of the guys that drop. Yeah. But you're telling me to be patient, so I might hold on to him.
Getting a little mixed messages.
See if he can right the ship.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Defenses. Jaguars at the Jets this week. I streamlined the Dolphins D this week, or this past week, because they were playing the Jets, but the Jets actually did pretty well.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do we still try to go after the Jets and use that philosophy?
It's a tried and true theory, but I am going with the Jags. The matchup is okay, but more so because the Jags defense has been really good this season. They kind of look like not to overreact as I mentioned earlier, but they kind of look like the real deal. They have a lot of young playmakers on this defense, and they looked really good against the Ravens in London. They can get to the quarterback, they can force fumbles, they can force turnovers. So I think, especially against the Jets, I think you're pretty good sticking with the Jaguars, and they're owned about 50% of leagues, so they're a streaming ad.
And your advice has always been to basically pick up whoever is playing.
It's all about the matchups.
The Browns or the Jets. Well, this week the Bengals at the Browns. Do you think they're a suitable option for a D?
Yeah, I like the Bengals too. I think so. The Browns are leading the NFL in turnovers. They have 9 turnovers through 3 games. That's not good.
Not the best.
That is good for the Bengals. I mean, for fantasy defenses, a lot of it comes down to turnovers. Obviously points are big. If you pitch a shutout, you're going to get a ton of points. But even if the Browns can put some points on the board, if the Bengals can, force Deshaun Kaiser to throw a couple interceptions, then they'll give you a solid performance. And I think even though they're in Cleveland, I think they'll be fine in that divisional matchup. I think it should be relatively low scoring.
I have a strategy I want to run by you. So last week, in week 4, we had our first bye week of the season. This season, the first bye week is in week 5. Yeah. Now, a lot of the advice that I'm seeing on Twitter, on social media, is go after who you want to play in week 5, who you want to replace those key players with now, before everyone starts thinking about it. So
it's not bad.
I don't know. Some strategizing going on there. They're spinning.
Yep.
We have guys off in week 5 like Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins, Drew Brees. So a lot of big quarterbacks that you might need to replace. What do you think? Is it too early? Is that just being an over planner?
I mean, it's always good to plan ahead. The more proactive you are, the better. I would say it kind of depends on what your roster looks like. If you're able to, say, if you have 2 quarterbacks and you have, say, Matt Ryan and someone else like Blake Bortles or kind of a QB2 there, yeah, then maybe if you're gonna start your backup anyways, or if you want to drop that backup in week 4 and go out and get another guy in week 5, I'm okay with that. I think there are a couple good plays out there in week 5 too. Just kind of looking ahead. This is a little bit of a deep dive, but if you want to go with Deshaun Kaiser, the Browns are playing the Jets in what should be an excellent football game.
So what do we do with the defenses there?
We'll address that in next week's fantasy fix. But Yeah, Deshaun Kaiser against the Jets. Jets are really bad against the pass. And then, I think you have a couple other good matchups. Brian Hoyer, obviously, another guy you can't really count on for consistent points, but he's playing the Colts in Week 5, so that's another potential option there. Jay Cutler, if you're picking him up this week, you might as well keep him around. He's playing the Titans, who actually have given up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks this season. So, yeah, I think that's a useful strategy. Obviously, it depends on your roster. I wouldn't drop anybody who you think someone else might scoop up on the waiver wire who might be, make an impact going forward. But if you can pull it off, why not? Yeah.
I'm not as patient as you, though, and I'm already thinking about who I'm going to drop from my roster. Eric Decker.
Yeah.
Not doing anything for me, man. I think he's probably gone.
Yeah, no, if a guy like that, I think you're going to be fine. Yeah, especially with Decker and other guys. I know you had a couple of other guys on that list.
Now that I have that first win of the season, I'm feeling more confident. I'm ready to
make some bold moves,
lose the dead weight here, and get some more wins. Okay, my last thing for you. Let's make a bold prediction for this week moving forward.
Bold prediction. I got it written down here. It's we got it all set.
That's how you know it's going to be good.
I like Willie Snead. In case you forgot about Willie Snead, he had a 3-game suspension, but he's back in Week 4. I think he's going to be a top 10 fantasy performer in Week 4 in his 2017 debut. Obviously, that's a bit of a risk just because it's his first game back. He's kind of got to assimilate into the offense a little bit. But I like the matchup against the Dolphins. They've been one of the worst passing defenses. I think they're bottom 5 in passing yards allowed. So Drew Brees gets one of his weapons back. He airs it out to Willie Snead, and the rest is history. I look like a genius. It's going to happen.
You always do. Well, Week 4 should be fun. Like we said, Patriots playing the Panthers. So make sure you keep it on NESN.com for all the news on that. And make sure you keep it on NESN.com for all your fantasy football news. If you have any questions that you want to ask directly, you can find him at Darren_Hartwell on Twitter and at It's Rachel Holt. Thanks so much for tuning in, and good luck this week.